What happens when revolution turns its fury not just on kings, but on the women caught in its path? In the convulsions of the French Revolution, the streets of Paris became a stage not just for justice, but for humiliation. Public shaming was wielded as a political weapon, particularly against women perceived as loyal to the ancien regime or resistant to the fervor of revolutionary change. What began as a cry for bread and justice often devolved into ritualized displays of vengeance. During the March on Versailles in October 1789, thousands of women stormed the royal palace demanding food and reform. Though they were hailed as heroines of the revolution, that same revolutionary tide would later turn against other women, especially those of noble birth. Female courtiers and aristocratic women suspected of royalist ties were dragged before hostile crowds, often jeered at and insulted, their dignity stripped as publicly as their titles. In the grim procession to the guillotine, women such as Madame Roland, a prominent Girondin intellectual, were transported in open tumbrils, carts designed to maximize public exposure. As they passed through Paris, sans-culotte spectators mocked them, hurling insults and epithets. This was not simply transportation, it was a spectacle of degradation, a final ritual before death meant to erase any remnants of aristocratic pride. Punishment extended beyond execution. Women denounced as counter-revolutionary were often subjected to symbolic acts of humiliation, head-shaving, enforced undressing to their shifts, and being paraded as cautionary examples. These actions, conducted in broad daylight, reflected the revolution's darker inclination toward street-level justice, where moral retribution blurred with public cruelty. As the revolution radicalized, it was not just tyrants who were targeted, but anyone, especially any woman, who stood on the wrong side of public opinion. Brutal conditions inside revolutionary prisons. If the streets offered humiliation, the prisons of revolutionary France delivered silent suffering. Behind iron bars and stone walls, thousands of women, noble and common alike, endured a daily descent into neglect, fear, and uncertainty. At the heart of Paris stood the conciergerie, ominously referred to as the antechamber to the guillotine. Once a royal palace, it had become a transit point for the condemned. Female prisoners here were crammed into overcrowded, poorly ventilated cells where straw beds served as their only comfort. Illness spread quickly, and basic sanitation was nearly non-existent. Yet it was not disease alone that weighed on them, it was the suffocating silence of not knowing if the next sunrise would be their last. Other notorious prisons, like La Force and Saint-Pelagier, held large numbers of women, many accused under the sweeping law of suspects enacted in 1793. With this decree, revolutionary authorities broadened the definition of enemy, resulting in mass arrests. Women with aristocratic titles, vague connections to émigrés, or even insufficient revolutionary zeal were suddenly deemed dangerous. The system was overwhelmed, and living conditions deteriorated further as cells meant for 6 might hold triple that number. We catch glimpses of this grim reality through the writings of Grace Dalrymple Elliott, a Scottish noblewoman imprisoned during the Reign of Terror. In her memoirs, she described the stench, the fear, and the constant roll call, each name read aloud with a chill of dread, as it could signal execution. While male prisoners often shared political camaraderie, many imprisoned women were isolated from allies and family. Forced confessions under harsh interrogation. Though physical torture had been officially abolished in France by 1788, the revolutionary authorities soon found other means of extracting submission. Under the intense scrutiny of the Revolutionary Tribunal, women accused of crimes against the revolution faced interrogation tactics that relied not on visible brutality, but on psychological pressure, coercion, and the ever-present threat of execution. The tribunal, established in 1793, was meant to deliver swift justice, but its proceedings often resembled foregone conclusions. Interrogators employed coercive questioning, confronting prisoners with accusations already echoed in public prints, demanding rapid responses under stress. Promises of leniency were dangled before some, only to be replaced by warnings of certain death if cooperation was withheld. These interrogations took place in dim, crowded chambers, with judges and prosecutors ready to pounce on the smallest contradiction. Beyond the courtroom, public opinion was weaponized. Newspapers like L'Ami du Peuple and revolutionary posters, known as affiches, often vilified women before their trials even began. Once branded as traitors or counter-revolutionaries, female prisoners walked into hearings already condemned by the court of public judgment. In this environment, the line between justice and performance blurred. Confessions, when given, were rarely born of guilt, but of fatigue, fear, and the crushing weight of revolutionary expectation. The September Massacres, women, crossed a terrifying threshold. Between the 2nd and 6th of that month, the prisons of Paris became sites of mass killings, fueled by fear, suspicion, and the breakdown of judicial order. What began as a response to rumors of counter-revolutionary plots and foreign invasion quickly spiraled into uncontrolled violence. The September Massacres, as they are now known, claimed the lives of over 1,000 prisoners, and among them were dozens of women executed without trial. Female inmates of La Force and Salpêtrière prisons, many accused of aristocratic sympathies or ties to the clergy, were targeted alongside their male counterparts. These were not formal executions, they were mob killings, carried out by citizens convinced they were acting in the revolution's defense. The women, some elderly or infirm, were forcibly removed from their cells, condemned in impromptu tribunals, and dispatched with rudimentary weapons. Among the most remembered victims of the terror were the Carmelite nuns of Compiègne. Though their execution came in 1794, 2 years after the September Massacres, their deaths reflected the revolution's escalating war on religion. Arrested for defying revolutionary secularization, the 16 nuns were guillotined on July 17, 1794, their serene hymns at the scaffold immortalizing them as symbols of faith under persecution. In contrast, the women killed in the September Massacres of 1792 remain largely nameless, their stories erased by the chaos of mob violence. This episode marked a chilling moment when revolutionary justice gave way to collective panic. Even prominent revolutionaries like Georges Danton justified the slaughter, saying, "Let us be terrible, so the people will not have to be." The execution of Queen Marie Antoinette, the guillotine's celebrity victim. By October 1793, the revolution had devoured its monarchy, and now, it turned its final gaze on the woman once known as Madame Deficit. On October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette, former Queen of France, was executed at the Place de la Révolution, a moment of spectacle that symbolized the revolution's desire not just to dismantle a regime, but to humiliate it completely. After the execution of Louis XVI in January of the same year, Marie Antoinette was no longer referred to by her royal title. Revolutionary authorities gave her a new name, the Widow Capet, stripping her of both dignity and past identity. Confined to a small, cold cell in the conciergerie, she was placed under strict surveillance, even while sleeping. The once elaborate rituals of Versailles had been replaced by harsh solitude and the ever-present sound of dripping water and iron keys. Her trial at the Revolutionary Tribunal was swift and politically motivated. Accusations of treason were accompanied by deeply personal and fabricated claims, including an inflammatory charge of incest with her own son. The allegation was designed not for legal substance but to incite public fury. Though she denied it firmly, the damage was done. As historian Jules Michelet observed, they needed a monster, not a woman. Her final ride through Paris was not in a closed carriage, but in an open cart, fully exposed to a jeering crowd. Pale, with her hair cut short, she stood silent, the very image of a monarchy brought low. The fate of female prisoners during the French Revolution reveals a haunting truth. When power shifts violently, it is often the voiceless who pay the highest price. In cellars, courtrooms, and crowded squares, women became both symbols and scapegoats, bearing the weight of a nation's rage and fear. Their suffering was not incidental, it was political, public, and enduring. What do the experiences of these women tell us about the true cost of revolutionary justice? Share your thoughts in the comments. As historian Pierre Vergniaud warned before facing his own execution, the revolution, like Saturn, devours its own children.